So, the practical side of primitive fire. Let's talk about the bow drill. So, if you needed to rely on a bow drill fire in a survival situation, it's nice to be able to do bow drill with natural cordage that you've made and everything that you've fashioned out of the wilderness with a flint knife that you made. But in a survival situation, if you have to rely on this bow drill friction fire method, you probably want to get the job done quickly, so you're going to use every possible advantage you can to make that fire happen. So here I found a stick for my bow, and of course I'm using nylon cordage, which is strong, and it's going to work much better than natural cordage which you've made out of tree bark. That wouldn't last long as a bow drill string, so use the best cordage you can, and your bow should be strong and lightweight, and ideally have a little bit of a bow to it. That's not absolutely necessary though, but you need to give yourself every possible advantage, every possible mechanical advantage. Especially your spindle needs to be straight as possible, and your bearing block needs to reduce friction as much as possible, because you want the friction down here, not up here. So here's something I make out of a piece of wood, and I carve out a divot here. It needs to be concave, and I take a bottle cap and pound it in there so that it fits that concave divot, and that makes a great low friction bearing block. Of course, you may not have time to fashion one of these, it's a little bit time consuming, so you do the best you can. Here's an example of a natural bearing block where you've just carved a quick divot in a piece of very hard wood, and that fits in there, and as you use it, of course, it'll dig in there deeper, but in order to reduce friction, and eventually it's going to start smoking. But if you put some kind of oil in there as a lubricant, which could be, say you have some cooking oil with you, you happen to have something like that, or you have snacks, say Slim Jim, you can jam a piece of that in there. It's got a lot of oil. Anything with oil, it can provide you a lubricant. Even oil from your face or your body, you can take some of that and rub it in there. Or quick and dirty, if you don't have anything oily, you could take say leaves, live leaves, like these poison ivy leaves, they just crush them up real good, and those kind of leaves will work, but that provides you with some source of lubrication that you can put in your bearing block. So use whatever you can, and there are many clever ideas for bearing blocks, but here's a quick and dirty one. You're always gonna find plastic bottles, right? So why don't you take a couple of pennies and just cut off the top of your plastic bottle, put the 2 pennies in there, and you now have a quick and dirty, low friction bearing block that you can use for your bow drill. I always carry gloves with me when I go into the woods, and I think think they're a good idea, but this thing can heat up, so I'm going to use my glove when I do this bow drill fire here. So let's do this. This happens to be a piece of box elder, and this plank, not sure what it is, it might even be pine, but I think it's more important to get that mechanical advantage than the types of wood, because I've been able to get friction fires from lots of different kinds of woods, and I found that having a low friction bearing block and every mechanical advantage with strong cordage is going to help more than the types of materials you use. I mean, that can come into play for sure, but let's just give this a try. I've already did the burn in and carved the notch, as you can see, because you don't care about that, do you? But there's plenty of videos, and I have videos of how to do that. But so to get this friction fire, I'm taking long strokes. And let that heat build up. You can see it's already building up some dust, but I want to see it smoking before I put more pressure on it and go faster with it. So let's start going now, faster and with more pressure. I can tell that bearing block's heating up. And it looks like the dust pile has formed a coal, and I think it has. Alright, well, that's burned up a little bit inside there, but it provided me with a low friction bearing block. So, and the other thing I did here was I took a piece of plastic to put my coal on. Use whatever material you can find, doesn't have to be natural, but this is just a piece of plastic I found, and now I have me a coal. So we'll let that coal coalesce, as they say. We have a little bit of time here. So I have some pine needles for my tinder bundle. They call the tinder bundles a bird's nest because ideally you want it to be about the size of a bird's nest. And one of the mistakes I've made and others beginners make is to put that coal in that tinder bundle, and the coal would probably fall through because I haven't compacted the center of it. So I'm going to compact the center of it. I'm going to put a piece of fine tinder, and it just so happens that one thing you can do is either get some pocket lint from cotton shorts, has to be cotton, or you can take your knife and scrape that up. You can see them already getting some fuzz. Use whatever you can, stuff that in the middle so it forms something the coal won't fall through. And if I keep scraping, oh look, all that scraping, look how much cotton I've got here. But I'm going to put that in the middle of my tinder bundle, and that's where I'm going to put the coal. so it doesn't fall through my tinder bundle. So I think this coal looks pretty good, and we can go ahead and put it right in our tinder bundle. Okay, let's do it this way. So that right there looks pretty good. I'm gonna wait a second, blow on it lightly, make sure that coal is glowing really well. And don't blow on it too hard at first. Have it. Can you see that? So we have success. We didn't use all natural materials. We used every advantage we could find, and we successfully made a friction fire. Okay. So there are other types of primitive fires. In fact, you want to see videos on every imaginable way to make fire, check out the David West channel. He's experimented in depth with just about every possible way there is to make fire. So I would suggest visiting David West's channel. So that's the rigmarole. We have flint and steel, not to be confused with your ferro rod, which is sometimes called a flint. That's a modern flint that's used in lighters and ferrocerium rods. The evil kitty. All right, but flint and steel. So here's flint and steel. Here's a piece of steel. It's designed for this particular purpose. And you got a piece of flint. This is actually chert, I believe. But you strike a sharp edge of a rock, which is harder than your steel, to make sparks. And right there, I saw some sparks. And those sparks have to land in some charred material, or chaga, which is a tinder fungus that actually is one of the few natural materials that can burn with a weak spark, like from a flint and steel. So this happens to be charred punk wood, and charred material like char cloth or punk wood or some other porous material accepts a weak spark and then just burns, and the harder you blow on it, the hotter it becomes, and it spreads that coal, and then you can blow that coal into a fire. So supposing you're not carrying a primitive flint and steel kit, but there's no other way to make fire, you don't have a piece of flint or chert, and you don't have one of these strikers. Well, you can find quartz in a riverbed usually, a piece of quartz, break it so you have a sharp edge. And then if you have a high carbon steel knife, like my Mora, striking against carbon steel is also going to create sparks. Or any other high carbon steel that you can find, like a file. So we found us a piece of flint, and we take our trusty Bushcraft knife, and we want to throw some sparks into the charred punk wood. And again, I think I will use my glove just for protection. There's a sharp piece that just flaked off. Let's see if we can't use that. Okay. As you can see, that can take a lot of tries, and being this narrow blade, you may not get as many sparks as you would with a dedicated striker, but we do have ignition. See if you can see that, but see that glowing? So, primitive flint and steel, and that can easily be put into a tinder bundle as well and blown into flame. So, yeah, I'm going to use every advantage I can in this rival situation. If I close this lid, that'll smother out the punk wood, and I can add more later and keep using that. But yeah, you've got a tin here which you can use to put punk wood or other material you want to char, and put that on a fire and char it, and you'll have something you can use for a flint and steel fire. It's a primitive fire making technique. It was commonly used before the more modern conveniences were invented, like the lighter and matches. So yeah, check out the David West channel. He's got a lot of other neat ideas on ways to make fire. He's experimented with all these primitive fire techniques and presented all different kinds of ways to do that. But I just wanted to present this to you, and those are my thoughts on the practical side of using primitive fire making techniques. So that's all I have to say. Thanks for watching, and we will catch you on another video. So that was practical primitive fire with Dr. Evil and Evil Kitty. She's very evil. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to see other videos like this, be sure to hit the notification bell so you know you'll receive notifications when a new one comes out.